When Isaiah Brooks said he could read 6 languages, Colonel Elias Ransom laughed so hard the glass in his lemonade trembled. 6 languages? Ransom said, leaning back on the wide white veranda. Boy, you look like you're still learning how shoes work. Isaiah stood at the bottom step in bare feet, a patched shirt, and trousers cut from somebody else's old Sunday suit. He was 13 years old, thin as a fence rail, with ink stains on 2 fingers nobody on that porch had noticed yet. Beside him, his mother, Rachel Brooks, held a basket of folded linen against her hip. Her hands were cracked from lye soap. Her eyes stayed low. Because in Blackwater County, Alabama, in 1896, a black woman who washed for white families did not raise her voice on a planter's porch. And her son did not correct the man who owned half the cotton gins in the county. But Isaiah had already done it. Ransom had pointed at the receipt pinned to a bundle of shirts and said, "I doubt he can read that." Isaiah had read it. Then he had corrected the French phrase printed beneath the merchant's seal. That was when Ransom asked, amused and cruel, "What else do you pretend to know?" And Isaiah said, "English, Latin, Greek, French, German, and Hebrew, sir." Rachel's breath caught. "Isaiah," she whispered, "apologize." Colonel Ransom smiled without warmth. He was 51, broad-shouldered, silver-bearded, and rich enough to mistake comfort for intelligence. "No," he said, "let the child entertain us." "What is it, then? Some prayer you memorized from the colored church?" Isaiah lifted his eyes. "Veritas libera," he said quietly, "sed superbium frangit." Ransom stopped rocking. The words were not kitchen Latin. They were not a Sunday school scrap. The grammar was clean, the pronunciation careful, and the meaning landed on that veranda like a blade set gently on a table. Truth frees, but it breaks pride first. For the first time that afternoon, Colonel Elias Ransom did not know what to say. Then he recovered himself. "One phrase proves nothing." "No, sir," Isaiah said. "It doesn't." He opened the cloth satchel at his side. Rachel saw the papers and went pale. "Isaiah," she said again, but the word was no longer a warning. It was fear. Because she knew her son, and she knew he had not come to that porch by accident. He pulled out a folded letter, creased from being read too often, and held it toward Ransom. "This is from Reverend Pike at Bethel Chapel. It says I completed Latin grammar through Caesar and Greek through the Gospel of John." Ransom did not take it, so Isaiah pulled out another. "This is from Miss Adler, the German widow who teaches behind the cabinet shop on Fridays." Another. "This is from Brother Duval, at the rail depot, French correspondence and commercial terms." And one more, smaller than the others, written in dark ink on thin paper. "This is from Rabbi Weizmann in Montgomery. Hebrew letters and basic translation." Now Ransom took the papers. He read them slowly, because disbelief takes longer when the evidence is real. The seals were not grand, the signatures were not famous, but they were genuine enough. Ransom's wife, Clara, had come to the doorway without speaking. His older son, Charles, stood behind her in a linen coat, watching the barefoot boy with the uneasy expression of a young man who had been praised all his life for doing half as much. Ransom looked at Isaiah. "Where did you steal these?" Isaiah's face did not change. "From nobody." "Then who wrote them for you?" "The people who taught me." "Taught you when?" "Before sunrise. After work. During church hours. On train platforms. In kitchens. Wherever somebody would lend me a book." Ransom barked a laugh, but it was smaller now. "All that for what? To show off in front of your mother?" Isaiah's voice stayed calm. "No, sir." He reached back into the satchel. "I came because there is a book in the county records room that you have never read correctly." The veranda changed, not visibly. The columns were still white. The lemonade was still sweating in the glass. The same heat pressed down on the fields, but everyone standing there felt the air tighten. Ransom's eyes sharpened. "What book?" "The 1841 Trust Register," Isaiah said. "The one your father signed before the courthouse fire. The one that names Blackwater poor children as beneficiaries of the old charity lot." Ransom's jaw worked once. "That register has nothing to do with you. It has everything to do with me." Rachel shut her eyes. Charles took a step forward. "Father, send him away." Ransom raised one hand, not looking at his son. "What do you think you found?" Isaiah unfolded a copied page. He had written it by hand in 3 columns, the original Latin, a literal translation, and plain English. "I found that the old carriage house behind your cotton office was not left for storage," he said. "It was left for a school." "A charity school," Ransom snapped. For white orphans. No, sir. Isaiah's finger touched the line. Signed discrimin coloris aut conditionis, without distinction of color or condition. Clara covered her mouth. Charles flushed. Ransom stared at the page as if the letters had insulted him personally. That is not what it means. It is what it says. You are 13. 13 years and 2 months. You expect me to accept a legal translation from a washerwoman's son? Isaiah nodded once. No. That is why Reverend Pike is waiting at the gate with Judge Merrill's old clerk. Ransom turned. Down the drive, beneath the live oaks, 2 men stood beside a buggy. One was a white Methodist minister whose sermons even Ransom pretended to respect. The other was Mr. Harlan, retired courthouse clerk, old enough to have copied the same register by candlelight before the war. Ransom's face hardened. You brought witnesses to my home. I brought readers, Isaiah said. For the next hour, the veranda became a classroom no one had agreed to enter. Reverend Pike asked Isaiah to translate a passage from the Latin Vulgate. Isaiah did. Mr. Harlan opened the copied trust clause and asked him to explain the ablative phrase. Isaiah did. Clara, who had studied in Mobile as a girl, spoke to him in French. Isaiah answered carefully, not perfectly, but well enough to make her sit down. Charles muttered a line of German he had memorized from a university songbook. Isaiah corrected the verb. Not rudely, worse, accurately. By the time the sun dropped behind the cotton fields, Colonel Ransom's face had lost its color. This boy, who owned no desk, no room of his own, no shoes for that afternoon, had done more with borrowed candles than Charles had done with tutors, riding horses, and a private academy, and that was only the first wound. The second was the register. Mr. Harlan tapped the copied page. The boy's translation is sound, he said. The old trust names poor children of the county. It does not restrict by color. That trust died with my father, Ransom said. Maybe in practice, Harlan replied. Maybe not in conscience. Ransom looked at Isaiah. What do you want? The question came out low. Not angry yet, not frightened yet, but close to both. Isaiah folded the page with both hands. I want the carriage house opened as a school, Charles laughed. For Negro children, for any poor child whose family cannot pay academy fees, Isaiah said. Black children, white children, mill children, tenant children, anyone who can come. Ransom stood. The boards under his boots groaned. You walk onto my porch with church papers and clerk's tricks, and now you ask me to shame my family in front of the county? No, sir, Isaiah said. I am asking you to honor your family in front of the truth. That line struck harder than the Latin. Ransom stepped down one stair. Rachel moved between them without meaning to, basket still pressed to her hip. Her whole life had taught her to fear a white man's anger before it fully arrived. Isaiah gently touched her sleeve. It's all right, Mama. But nothing was all right. In Blackwater County, a black child accusing a planter could disappear into a ditch, and the law would call it weather. Ransom knew that. Rachel knew that. Everyone on that porch knew that. The only person who did not look afraid was Isaiah. And that frightened Ransom more than anything else. Do you understand what people will say? Ransom asked. If I open a school with colored children on Ransom land? Yes, sir. Do you understand what men in masks do when they think the old order is being mocked? Yes, sir. Then why would you ask this? Isaiah's voice softened. Because I can read 6 languages, and I still have to do it in the dark. No one answered. I have studied with coal smoke in my eyes, Isaiah said. I have copied Greek letters on flour sacks. I have hidden books under laundry, because grown men think letters become dangerous when black hands touch them. He looked past Ransom toward the cotton office beyond the trees. That building sits empty. Children sit empty too, sir. Only one of those is a choice. Ransom stared at him for a long time. Then he said, You will have my answer tomorrow. That night, Colonel Elias Ransom did not sleep. He sat in his study with the copied register, his father's old ledger, and a bottle he barely touched. The house was quiet around him. Outside, summer rain moved over the fields. He read the Latin line again. Signed discrimin coloris aut conditionis. Without distinction of color or condition. He hated how simple it was. He had spent years telling himself the world was complicated. That poverty was natural. That race explained everything. That hierarchy was order, and order was mercy. But the boy had done something no sermon had ever done. He had made Ransom's beliefs look lazy. Not evil first. Not even cruel first. Lazy. A soft bed pretending it was a throne. A private academy pretending it was genius. A white name pretending it was proof. Near midnight, Charles entered the study. "Father," Ransom did not look up. "How much Latin do you know?" Charles shifted. "Enough. Translate that line." Charles took the page, frowned, and took too long. Ransom watched his son struggle. The boy was 17, healthy, educated, expensive, and he could not do what Isaiah Brooks had done barefoot in the heat. Charles handed the page back. "It's legal Latin. It's not fair to ask." Ransom laughed once. A dry sound. "No," he said. "It is not fair." Charles relaxed, thinking he had been excused. Then Ransom looked at him. "It is not fair that you were given every advantage and taught to call adequacy inheritance." Charles stiffened. "That washerwoman's boy humiliated you. He revealed me," Ransom said. "Father, listen to yourself. If you open that school, the county will turn on you. They may. The night riders will come. They might. For what? To prove a point to a child?" Ransom folded the paper. "No, Charles. To stop being less than one." At breakfast, Clara found him already dressed. She had been awake too. "You are going to the carriage house," she said. Ransom nodded. "Elias, they will not forgive you for this. I know. Some will say you were threatened." "I was. Were you?" Ransom looked toward the window. The rain had stopped. The fields shone black and heavy. "I was threatened by a sentence my father signed, and I never bothered to read." Clara stepped closer. "And by the boy?" Ransom thought of Isaiah's bare feet, the ink stains, the steadiness in his eyes. "No," he said. "He did not threaten me. What did he do?" Ransom took his hat. "He removed my excuses." By noon, Isaiah was waiting at the old carriage house with Rachel, Reverend Pike, and Mr. Harlan. The building leaned at one corner. Its paint had peeled to gray. Cotton scales rusted under the side awning. A mule collar hung from a nail as if the past had been left there and forgotten. Ransom arrived alone. No buggy, no servant, no son. He walked the ground slowly, measuring walls with his eyes. Finally he turned to Isaiah. "I have conditions." Isaiah nodded. "First, the school is for poor children of this county, black and white. No speeches about revenge. No stirring mobs. Books, numbers, writing, history, scripture, and useful trades. Agreed. Agreed. Second, Reverend Pike will supervise instruction until proper teachers are found. Agreed. Third, your mother will be paid to keep the building, manage supplies, and serve as school matron." Rachel looked up sharply. "Colonel Ransom, you have raised the most formidable mind in this county," Ransom said. "I assume you can manage chalk." Rachel's mouth trembled. Isaiah did not smile, but his eyes changed. "And fourth," Ransom said, facing him, "you will attend when your work permits. Not as a servant, as a scholar. And when you outgrow this place, we will find the next place." The words cost him something. Everyone heard it. Isaiah extended his hand. Ransom took it. A planter's hand around a black boy's hand in front of witnesses. Small enough to fit between two breaths, large enough to split a county. Then Isaiah said, "There is one more thing you should know." Ransom's eyes narrowed. "The trust clause is real," Isaiah said, "but the legal claim is weak. The original trustees are dead. The fund was never properly renewed. Mr. Harlan believes a court might dismiss it." Ransom looked at Harlan. The old clerk did not deny it. "So," Ransom said slowly, "you had no certainty." "No, sir. You made me believe I might be forced. I made you read what your father wrote. You gambled on my conscience." Isaiah held his gaze. "I gambled that you still had one." For a moment, Rachel looked as if she might faint. Reverend Pike closed his eyes. And then Elias Ransom began to laugh. Not the whip-crack laugh from the veranda. A different laugh. One that sounded like a man discovering the lock on his cage had been inside the door. "You are a dangerous child," he said. "Yes, sir," Isaiah answered. "You should become a lawyer." "No, sir. I want to become a teacher first." Ransom looked at the peeling building, the rusted scale, the empty doorway. Then he looked back at the boy. "Then let us begin before I become foolish again." The Blackwater School opened 8 weeks later. It did not open quietly. Someone painted a warning on the carriage house door. Someone threw a brick through the first window Ransom bought. One night, riders circled the road with covered faces and torches held high enough for everyone inside the Ransom house to understand the message. But the next morning, Rachel Brooks swept glass from the school floor, nailed burlap over the broken window, and set the primer books back on the table. 29 children came the first day, 19 black, 10 white, all poor enough to understand hunger. All quiet when they saw Isaiah Brooks write the alphabet in English, Greek, and Hebrew across a slate. Reverend Pike taught reading. Rachel kept order with a bell and a look sharper than any ruler. Ransom came every Friday and sat in the back. At first, the children feared him. Then they realized he came to listen. By winter, a white mill girl named Annie could multiply faster than Charles Ransom. A black tenant boy named Joseph read a newspaper aloud to his father. Two sisters who had never owned a book copied whole pages, by lamplight, and returned them without a single torn corner. The county still talked. The county still threatened. But the school kept opening its door. Year after year, that door became harder to close. Isaiah left at 16 for a normal college on a scholarship arranged by Reverend Pike, Clara Ransom, and 3 businessmen who never admitted publicly that they helped. By 23, he could read 9 languages. By 30, he was translating diplomatic correspondence in Washington. By 40, he was known among officials as the man who could hear the trap inside a treaty before the ink dried. But every summer he returned to Blackwater. He returned to the carriage house with new books, new maps, and stories from countries whose names made the youngest children lean forward in disbelief. Rachel Brooks served the school for 26 years. She learned bookkeeping because the school needed it. Then scheduling, then teacher placement, then county petitions. People who once called her the washerwoman began calling her Mrs. Brooks, not because their hearts had all improved, but because competence has a way of forcing language to kneel. Elias Ransom lived long enough to see the school expand twice. He lost friends, he lost invitations, he lost the easy admiration of men who had never asked him to be better. But he gained something stranger, peace, not innocence, never that. But the peace of a man who had stopped defending the worst thing he had been taught. On his last winter, when illness had thinned him to bone and breath, he sent for Isaiah. Isaiah came from Washington on the night train, carrying a leather case and wearing a dark wool coat. Ransom was propped against pillows in the same room where he had once read the trust clause in anger. His voice was almost gone. "Tell me the truth," he whispered. Isaiah leaned closer. "When did you decide I could be turned?" Isaiah was silent for a while. Then he said, "On the veranda." Ransom's eyes moved toward him. "When I spoke Latin, you were angry. But before you called me a liar again, you listened to the grammar." A faint smile touched Ransom's mouth. "That was enough?" "It was a crack," Isaiah said. "Cracks are where light starts its work." Ransom closed his eyes. "I spent half my life certain I was above you. I know. And you still came back every summer." "Yes. Why?" Isaiah looked out the window toward the school building, now painted white, its windows bright with afternoon sun. "Because you proved something I needed to believe." "What?" "That truth can break pride without killing the man inside it." Ransom breathed once. Then again. "Veritas liberat," he whispered. Isaiah finished it for him. "Sed superbium frangit." Truth frees, but it breaks pride first. Elias Ransom died before dawn. The Blackwater School remained open for generations. Its students became teachers, nurses, clerks, ministers, printers, doctors, and lawyers. Some left Alabama. Some stayed and fought battles Isaiah's first class could barely have imagined. The old carriage house was eventually replaced by a brick building, but the first slate was kept in a glass case near the entrance. Across it, faded but still visible, were 6 alphabets written by a barefoot boy who had learned in the dark. The world had tried to chain his future to a washbasket. Isaiah answered in 6 languages, and built a school out of the silence that followed.